license and registration.
Officer, we're transporting a critical cardiac arrest patient. We need to get to the hospital right now.
Clock you doing 78 and a 65.
We're an emergency vehicle in active transport. We're allowed to exceed the speed limit. Sir, every second counts for our patient.
You're transporting a white woman. All of you in this ambulance are black.
What does that have to do
She's
with
our
anything?
patient.
On September 14, 2024, Georgia State Patrol Officer Brett Dunleavy saw an ambulance speeding down I-285 with its emergency lights flashing and made a decision that would end a woman's life and his own career in the same afternoon. He pulled over the emergency vehicle, demanded the black driver step out, saw the all-black paramedic crew working frantically on an unconscious white patient in the back, and his racist instincts told him this had to be a kidnapping rather than a legitimate medical emergency. For 8 minutes, he kept that ambulance on the side of the highway, ignoring their credentials, ignoring dispatch confirmation, ignoring the monitors showing a woman in cardiac arrest, because he could not see past the color of their skin. What Dunleavy didn't know was that those 8 minutes were the difference between life and death, that the woman would be pronounced dead at Grady Memorial Hospital 30 minutes later, and that he had just committed an act so catastrophically racist that it would make national headlines and end with him facing manslaughter charges. This one is going to shake you. Hit that like button and subscribe to CopsCam Archives right now because you need to see how this ends. The call came into Fulton County Emergency Services at 2:47 p.m. A woman had collapsed at her home on Cascade Heights Drive, a quiet residential street in southwest Atlanta, where older homes sat on tree-lined lots with views that stretched toward downtown. The caller was frantic, a neighbor who'd been visiting for afternoon tea when a 58-year-old Lorraine Mitchell suddenly grabbed her chest and went down hard on the kitchen floor. No pulse, not breathing. The neighbor started CPR while screaming into the phone for help. Ambulance 17 from Grady EMS was 3 minutes away when dispatch sent the call. Deshaun Williams was behind the wheel, 34 years old, a paramedic with Grady for 9 years, who knew every shortcut and back road in southwest Atlanta. Beside him in the passenger seat was Ayanna Clark, the lead paramedic, 41 years old with 14 years of experience, and a calm under pressure that had saved more lives than she could count. In the back preparing equipment was Janelle Porter, 28, newer to the job but sharp and capable, already pulling out the defibrillator and oxygen before they even arrived on scene. They hit the address at 2:50 p.m., grabbed their gear, and found Lorraine on the kitchen floor with the neighbor still doing compressions. Ayanna took over immediately, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she checked for a pulse, checked her airway, got the AED pads on her chest. Janelle got an IV started while Deshaun radioed ahead to Grady Memorial Hospital that they had a possible cardiac arrest inbound. "Let's move," Ayanna said. They loaded Lorraine onto the stretcher and into the back of the ambulance in under 90 seconds. Ayanna climbed in back with Janelle while Deshaun got behind the wheel. He hit the lights and sirens and pulled out onto Cascade Heights Drive, heading for the fastest route to Grady Memorial Hospital on Jesse Hill Jr. Drive, about 6 miles northeast through the heart of the city. Lorraine's heart rhythm on the monitor was erratic and dangerous. Ayanna administered medication, kept her airway clear, monitored her vitals while calling ahead to the ER with updates. They were doing everything right, everything by the book, but Lorraine was critical and getting worse. Every second mattered. Deshaun merged onto Interstate 285 heading east, the ambulance moving fast in the left lane with full lights and sirens. Traffic parted for them the way it was supposed to, cars pulling to the right, giving them space. They were making good time. Grady was maybe 4 minutes out if traffic stayed clear. That's when Deshaun saw the Georgia State Patrol car in his rearview mirror. At first, he thought the trooper was just behind them in traffic, maybe escorting them or heading to his own call. But then the patrol car's lights came on, and the trooper moved up close behind the ambulance, right on their bumper. Deshaun frowned. They were in an active emergency transport. The troopers should know that from the lights and sirens alone. The patrol car pulled alongside them in the right lane. Deshaun glanced over and saw a white trooper gesturing emphatically for him to pull over. Deshaun's stomach dropped. Pull over? They had a dying patient. He shook his head and pointed to the back of the ambulance, trying to signal that they couldn't stop, but the trooper was insistent, his gestures becoming more aggressive. "What's happening?" Ayanna called from the back. "State Patrol wants us to pull over," Deshaun called back. Are you serious? Ayana's voice was sharp with disbelief. We're in active transport. Keep going. Deshawn tried to keep moving, but the patrol car stayed alongside them, the trooper now pointing forcefully at the shoulder. Other drivers were slowing down, confused by what they were seeing. The whole situation was creating more danger. Finally, against every instinct and every piece of training he had, Deshawn put on his turn signal and started to pull toward the shoulder near the Cascade Road exit. What are you doing? Ayana shouted from the back. We can't stop. She's crashing. He's not letting us through, Deshawn said, bringing the ambulance to a stop on the shoulder. Cars and trucks blew past them at 70 miles an hour, the ambulance rocking slightly in their wake. The trooper pulled in behind them and got out of his vehicle. He was in his late 30s, average build, wearing the distinctive uniform and campaign hat of the Georgia State Patrol. His name tag read Dunleavy. He approached the driver's side window with his hand resting on his service weapon. Deshawn rolled down the window, his hands visible on the steering wheel. Officer, we're transporting a critical patient. We need to get moving right now. License and registration, Dunleavy said. No greeting, no acknowledgement of the emergency, just a command. Sir, I'm a paramedic with Grady EMS. We have a woman in cardiac arrest in the back of this ambulance. We need to get to the hospital immediately. I clocked you doing 78 in a 65, Dunleavy said. License and registration. Deshawn stared at him. We're an emergency vehicle in active transport. We're allowed to exceed the speed limit. That's the law. Ayana appeared at the partition between the cab and the patient compartment, her face tight with urgency. Officer, our patient is dying. We have been on scene for less than 6 minutes, and we need to get to Grady Memorial right now. Every second we sit here is a second she doesn't have. Dunleavy looked past Deshawn into the back of the ambulance. His eyes moved from Ayana to Janelle, who was working frantically over Lorraine's unconscious form, then to Lorraine herself, a white woman hooked up to monitors and IVs with an oxygen mask over her face. Something shifted in Dunleavy's expression. His eyes narrowed. Step out of the vehicle, he said to Deshawn. What? Deshawn couldn't believe what he was hearing. Officer, we can't. I said step out of the vehicle, right now. Deshawn looked at Ayana, who was staring at Dunleavy with an expression that was moving rapidly from urgency to anger. She came forward and leaned toward the window. Officer Dunleavy, she said, reading his name tag, keeping her voice as controlled as she could manage. I am the lead paramedic on this unit. We received a 911 call for a cardiac arrest patient. We have that patient in our care right now. She is critical. We need to transport her to definitive care immediately. You are delaying life-saving treatment. Dunleavy was looking into the back of the ambulance again, his attention fixed on Lorraine. Who is that woman? The question hung in the air for a moment. She's our patient, Ayana said slowly. Why does that matter? I need to see identification from all of you, Dunleavy said. Right now. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. If you believe that saving lives should never be delayed by racism, then hit that like and subscribe button and join the CopsCam Archives family, because this story is about to get worse. Deshawn pulled out his paramedic license and handed it through the window to Dunleavy, along with his driver's license. Ayana did the same from where she stood at the partition, her hands shaking slightly with barely controlled frustration. Janelle stayed in the back, her hands never leaving Lorraine, whose vitals were getting worse with every passing second. Dunleavy took the licenses and walked back to his patrol car to run them. The seconds turned into a minute, then 2 minutes. The monitors in the back of the ambulance were beeping steadily, tracking a heart rhythm that was becoming more and more unstable. Her blood pressure is dropping, Janelle called out, her voice tight. Ayana, we need to move now. Ayana leaned out the driver's window. Officer Dunleavy, our patient is coding. We need to go right now. Dunleavy was still in his patrol car, typing on his computer. He either didn't hear her or chose not to respond. Deshawn gripped the steering wheel, every instinct screaming at him to just drive away, to get Lorraine to the hospital and deal with the consequences later. But he also knew that fleeing from a traffic stop could end with him shot or arrested, and that wouldn't help Lorraine either. He was trapped between two impossible choices. Dunleavy finally got out of his patrol car and walked back to the ambulance. He handed the licenses back through the window, but didn't step away. Instead, he moved toward the back of the ambulance. "I need to verify this situation," he said. "Verify what situation?" Ayanna asked, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "We're paramedics responding to a 911 call. Everything we're doing is documented through dispatch. You can call it in right now and confirm it." "I'll determine what I need to confirm," Dunleavy said. He walked to the back doors of the ambulance and pulled them open. Janelle looked up from where she was working on Lorraine, her face a mixture of shock and anger. "Sir, you need to close those doors. You're compromising a sterile environment." Dunleavy ignored her and climbed partially into the ambulance, his eyes moving over Lorraine's unconscious form, the medical equipment, the monitors showing her failing vitals. "What's her name?" "That's protected health information," Ayanna said, coming to the back. "We can't disclose patient information to you. Now please get out of this ambulance so we can do our jobs." "You're transporting a white woman," Dunleavy said, and there was something in his voice now, an edge that made it clear where his mind had gone. "And all three of you are black. That seems unusual." The words landed like a slap. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the beeping of the monitors and the rush of traffic onto the highway beside them. "Unusual?" Ayanna repeated, and her voice had gone very quiet and very cold. "What exactly are you implying, officer?" "I'm not implying anything," Dunleavy said. "I'm asking direct questions. How do I know this is a legitimate medical transport? How do I know you didn't just pick up some woman off the street?" Deshawn turned in his seat, unable to stay quiet anymore. "Are you serious right now? You think we kidnapped a woman and put her in an ambulance with full medical equipment and called ahead to a hospital to tell them we're bringing her in? Does that make any sense to you at all?" "I've seen a lot of things that don't make sense," Dunleavy said. "I need proof that this is legitimate." "We gave you our licenses," Ayanna said. "Call dispatch. Call Grady Hospital. Call anyone. They will confirm we are exactly who we say we are and that we are transporting exactly who we say we're transporting. But do it fast because this woman is dying while you stand here accusing us of crimes we didn't commit." Janelle's voice cut through the argument, sharp and desperate. "She's in VFib. We need to shock her now." Ayanna spun around and moved back to Lorraine, pushing past Dunleavy. She grabbed the defibrillator paddles while Janelle cleared away from the patient. "Charging! Everyone clear!" The defibrillator delivered its shock, and Lorraine's body jerked on the stretcher. Ayanna checked the monitor. The rhythm converted briefly, but then started to deteriorate again. "We need to get her to a hospital right now," Ayanna said, her voice breaking slightly. "Officer Dunleavy, I am begging you. Let us go. You can follow us. You can arrest us at the hospital if you still think we're criminals. But let us get this woman to definitive care before it's too late." Dunleavy stood in the back of the ambulance for a long moment, his hands still resting on his duty belt, his face unreadable. Then he pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need confirmation on a Grady EMS ambulance, unit number 17, currently stopped on I-285 eastbound near Cascade Road." The seconds stretched out. Traffic continued to roar past them. Lorraine's oxygen saturation was dropping on the monitor, the numbers falling into dangerous territory. Finally, the radio crackled. "Unit 47, Grady EMS Ambulance 17 is on an active emergency transport. Cardiac arrest patient. They should not be delayed." Dunleavy's jaw tightened. He looked at the three paramedics, at Lorraine dying on the stretcher, and finally stepped down from the ambulance. "Go," he said. Ayanna didn't wait. She slammed the back doors shut and yelled to Deshawn, "Drive, now!" Deshawn hit the gas and the ambulance lurched back onto the highway, sirens screaming. They'd been stopped on that shoulder for 8 minutes and 12 seconds. 8 minutes that Lorraine Mitchell didn't have. Ayanna worked frantically in the back, administering more medication, doing everything she could to stabilize a patient who was slipping away. Janelle kept up compressions when the rhythm failed completely. The monitors showed what they both already knew but couldn't say out loud yet. They were losing her. They pulled into the Grady Memorial Hospital ambulance bay at 3:09 p.m. The ER team was waiting, already briefed on the incoming cardiac arrest. Ayanna gave them a rapid handoff as they moved Lorraine from the ambulance stretcher to the hospital gurney. 58-year-old female, witness collapse at home, bystander CPR initiated. We arrived on scene at 2:50. She was in VFib. We cardioverted once, got a rhythm briefly but lost it again. She's been down approximately 22 minutes total. The ER doctor's face tightened at that number. 22 minutes was a long time. Too long. They rushed Lorraine into the trauma bay and the doors swung shut behind them, leaving the paramedic crew standing in the hallway. Deshawn, Ayanna, and Janelle didn't speak. They just stood there in their uniforms, covered in the evidence of the fight they just lost, knowing that 8 of those 22 minutes had been stolen from them by a man who saw their skin color before he saw their uniforms. The ER doctor came out 40 minutes later. His face told them everything before he said a word. "We couldn't get her back," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. Time of death 3:47 p.m. Ayanna closed her eyes. Janelle turned away, her hand over her mouth. Deshawn just stood there staring at nothing. "The delay," Ayanna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we hadn't been stopped." "I'm documenting everything in my report," the doctor said, and his voice had gone hard, "including the fact that you were delayed 8 minutes during active transport of a critical patient. That delay was medically significant." A woman's voice came from down the hallway, rising in pitch and desperation. "Where is she? Where's my mother?" A man in his 60s came around the corner with a younger woman beside him, both of them moving fast toward the ER entrance. The man was tall, barrel-chested, with silver hair and the kind of bearing that said he was used to being in charge. He wore a jacket with a fire department insignia on the chest. The ER doctor stepped forward. "Sir, are you family of Lorraine Mitchell?" "I'm her husband," the man said. "Clifton Mitchell. This is our daughter. Where is she?" The doctor's expression shifted into the careful, practiced sympathy that came with delivering terrible news. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm very sorry. We did everything we could, but your wife didn't survive. I'm so sorry for your loss." Clifton Mitchell's face went completely blank for a moment, like his brain couldn't process what he just heard. His daughter made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "What happened?" Clifton asked, and his voice was steady but barely. "She was healthy. She was fine this morning." "She suffered a cardiac arrest," the doctor said. "The paramedics responded quickly and did excellent work, but there were complications during transport." "What kind of complications?" Clifton asked, and something in his tone had changed. He was asking now like someone who understood emergency services, someone who knew that complications during transport was a phrase that meant something had gone wrong. The doctor hesitated, then gestured to Deshawn, Ayanna, and Janelle, who were still standing there. "These are the paramedics who responded to your wife. They can explain better than I can." Clifton turned and looked at the 3 of them. His eyes moved over their Grady EMS uniforms, their exhausted faces, and something in his expression shifted. "You were with my wife?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Ayanna said quietly. "We responded to the 911 call from your home. We were transporting her here when—" She stopped, her voice catching. "When what?" Clifton asked, and his voice had gone very quiet. Deshawn spoke up, his words coming out flat and tired. "When we were pulled over by Georgia State Patrol on I-285. He stopped us for 8 minutes. Clifton went completely still. "He stopped an ambulance during an active transport." "Yes, sir," Deshawn said. "Why?" Nobody answered right away. "How did you say it? How did you tell a man whose wife just died that she might still be alive if a cop hadn't looked into an ambulance and decided that black paramedics with a white patient looked suspicious?" "He thought we kidnapped her," Ayanna said finally, her voice breaking. "He saw us, he saw your wife, and he thought we'd kidnapped her." The hallway went completely silent. Clifton Mitchell stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned to the ER doctor. "You said the delay was medically significant." "Yes," the doctor said carefully. "In a cardiac arrest, every minute without definitive care decreases survival chances significantly. 8 minutes is, he paused. It's substantial. Clifton looked back at the paramedics. His daughter was crying quietly beside him. His own eyes were wet, but his voice was steady when he spoke. I'm a retired battalion chief with Atlanta Fire Department, he said. I know how this works. I know what protocols are. And I know that nobody stops an ambulance in active transport unless something is very, very wrong. He paused. What was the trooper's name? Dunleavy, Deshawn said. Brett Dunleavy, Georgia State Patrol. Clifton Mitchell nodded slowly. That name's about to mean something very different by the time I'm done. Brett Dunleavy finished his shift that evening and went home feeling like he'd done his job. He'd pulled over a speeding vehicle, verified the situation, and let them go once dispatch confirmed their story. In his mind, he'd been thorough and professional. He had no idea that Lorraine Mitchell had died, or that her death was already being connected directly to the 8 minutes he'd kept that ambulance on the side of the highway. By the next morning, everything had changed. Clifton Mitchell didn't sleep that night. He sat in his kitchen with his daughter and made phone calls. He called the Georgia State Patrol Command Staff. He called the Fulton County Medical Examiner. He called reporters he knew from his 30 years in the fire service. And he called attorneys who specialized in civil rights cases and wrongful death. The story broke on the local Atlanta news at noon the next day. Woman dies after state trooper stops ambulance, accuses black paramedics of kidnapping. The headline was devastating, and it was accurate. By evening, it had gone national. The dashboard camera footage from Ambulance 17 was released to the media within 48 hours. It showed everything. Dunleavy pulling the ambulance over. The 8-minute delay. The paramedics begging him to let them go. Ayanna explaining that their patient was dying. Dunleavy climbing into the back of the ambulance and asking how he could be sure this was legitimate. The audio captured him saying, "You're transporting a white woman, and all three of you are black. That seems unusual." The public reaction was immediate and furious. The footage had millions of views within hours. People who watched it saw exactly what had happened. A racist cop had decided that black paramedics couldn't possibly be doing their jobs legitimately, and his paranoia had cost a woman her life. The Georgia State Patrol placed Dunleavy on administrative leave within 72 hours. The Fulton County District Attorney opened a criminal investigation. And Clifton Mitchell, standing beside Deshawn, Ayanna, and Janelle at a press conference, announced that he was filing a wrongful death lawsuit against Dunleavy personally and the Georgia State Patrol. My wife was a good woman, Clifton said, his voice steady but his eyes wet. She was a mother, a grandmother, and a retired school teacher who spent 40 years helping children learn to read. She deserved to live, and she would have lived if Officer Dunleavy had done what every officer is trained to do when they see an emergency vehicle: get out of the way. The medical examiner's report was released 2 weeks later. It stated clearly that the 8-minute delay during transport was a significant contributing factor to Lorraine Mitchell's death. In cardiac arrest cases, the report explained, every minute without definitive care decreased survival chances by 7 to 10%. The delay had pushed her past the point where revival was possible. Dunleavy was fired from the Georgia State Patrol 3 weeks after the incident. The termination letter cited gross negligence, racial profiling, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. But the consequences didn't stop there. The Fulton County District Attorney filed criminal charges: involuntary manslaughter, official misconduct, and deprivation of rights under color of law. The prosecution's case was straightforward and brutal. They had the dashboard camera footage, they had the medical examiner's report, they had dispatch recordings confirming the ambulance was on a legitimate call, and they had Dunleavy's own words on tape, questioning why black paramedics were transporting a white patient. The trial lasted 8 days. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. They found Dunleavy guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. The civil lawsuit went to trial separately. Clifton Mitchell and his family sued for wrongful death, seeking $25 million in damages. The case was never really in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury awarded the family $18 million. Dunleavy was personally liable for $3 million. The Georgia State Patrol was liable for $15 million. The judgment would follow Dunleavy for the rest of his life. But money couldn't bring Lorraine back. Deshawn, Ayanna, and Janelle all continued working as paramedics. but something had changed in them. They'd done everything right and still watched their patient die because of someone else's racism. The trauma of that stayed with them. Grady EMS provided counseling. The city recognized them publicly for their professionalism under impossible circumstances. But recognition didn't erase the memory of those 8 minutes on the highway shoulder, or the sound of the flatline tone in the ER. The Georgia State Patrol implemented new policies. Officers were prohibited from stopping emergency vehicles in active transport, except in cases of immediate public safety threats. Mandatory training on implicit bias. A review process for any stop involving emergency services personnel. The policies were named the Lorraine Mitchell Protocols. Clifton Mitchell kept his wife's photo on his desk. In it, she was smiling, vibrant, alive. Every time he looked at it, he thought about those 8 minutes. 8 minutes that had been stolen from her by a man who couldn't see past the color of someone's skin. 8 minutes that had turned a survivable medical emergency into a death sentence. Brett Dunleavy sat in a Georgia state prison, his career destroyed, his freedom gone, his name permanently associated with the racist decision that killed an innocent woman. He had 8 years to think about those 8 minutes on the highway. 8 minutes when he'd had the power to save a life by simply doing nothing, by simply letting the ambulance pass. Instead, he decided to stop them, and Lorraine Mitchell had paid the price. If this story opened your eyes to how racism can be deadly even when it's not holding a weapon, share it. Make sure people understand that every second matters and prejudice costs lives. Hit subscribe on CopsCam Archives because we're not stopping until every story like this gets the attention it deserves. Justice doesn't happen in silence.